Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. We're excited to have Dawn Bloomer here with us today, and we have some exciting things to talk about. We're going to be talking about productive pressure. We're going to be talking about burnout. We're going to be talking about that overall well-being. So, Dawn, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Women in Leadership Talk.
Vicki, thanks so much for having me. I've already been having a good time getting to know you before we started. So it's been
likewise. Yes, we have a lot in common.
We do. It's crazy. It's crazy.
It is. It's awesome. And let me just welcome our audience. We thank you for being here. We know you have a choice as to what podcast you listen to, and we're grateful that you're now listening to us in 44 different countries. So thank you for that support, and thank you for sharing the messages that we're sharing with you. So, Dawn, let's jump in. I'm going to talk a little bit about your background just to give our audience, some context as to who you are. And then we're going to just get into a conversation. And this is a hot topic, I think, that we're going to be tapping into today.
Great.
Awesome. So, Dawn is the founder of Productive Pressure. It's a philosophy and a method that masterfully balances the drive for success with a safeguard against burnout. And that's a hot topic. I know we could be here for a while, so just get ready, audience.
Yeah, get ready. Settle in.
So, her experiences in nurturing her veterinary practice, spearheading growth, fostering strategic alliances, and orchestrating its successful acquisition by a larger aggregator have fortified her with an understanding of the intricate dynamics of business expansion and exit planning. So I want to start out by you sharing, just more of your background and how you've made this pivot into, this productive pressure, but also talking about this exit planning. I think that's also such an important piece. So I'm going to turn it over to you and just let you give us some context as to how you got to where you are today.
Sure. So when I was 6 years old, I decided I wanted to be a horse doctor. And so I spent the next, 20 something years getting there. And for over 20 years, I was a veterinarian for racehorses, which is sort of like a niche within a niche. Mm-hmm. And along the way, I had several marriages, a couple of kids. I got my MBA. I bought into our practice when I was just as I was having my son. So all this stuff was happening. And then over time decided that I was really interested in the business aspects of practice, much more so even than the medical side of it. And so I started thinking, well, what's next? And what I was really interested in was consulting and helping other people. I like being that person in the background who's sort of helping everybody else do the thing. And so I decided at one point, after we had merged our practice with a group of other practices and then grown that group, and we were subsequently acquired again, I decided that was a good time for me to, make a big change. And it's been an amazing journey. I've been really fortunate that, now I really feel like I'm living the life that I always thought I would get out of everything. I think for a long time as an entrepreneur, I couldn't quite get a grip on why I seemed outwardly successful. Like people thought I really had it figured out and I had it going on, but inwardly I felt exhausted and stressed out. And, I just kept telling myself, like the voice in my head kept saying, if I can just, do this for another 2 years, if I can keep going for 6 months. And then it got to the point where I was like, if I can just get through the next 6 days, then things are going to get better. And I don't quite know why I thought things were going to get better, because I wasn't doing anything differently. So that was sort of a long answer to a short question.
Well, no, I think that actually opens up quite a bit of conversation, because what that last thing you just said, if you kept doing the same thing, thinking you were going to get a different result, I think that's a very normal human experience, right? We get into that pattern because we don't want to give up. And we talked a little bit about that before we started the show. We just put your head down, keep going, keep pushing, you're going to get there. But, one thing you had shared with me just before, we started the recording was about thinking you might want to go into burnout. Is how you were feeling yourself. Is that kind of what led you to thinking about being originally a burnout coach?
Yes. Yes, actually. So what I thought as I got to the end of my time in practice, in veterinary practice, I thought, gosh, I think now that I understand all the things that I did wrong, I think I could help other people. And I decided that I'll become a burnout coach. And then it didn't quite scratch my itch for helping people grow their business in a sustainable way as much as I wanted to, because I still love the business piece of it. So what I did is I sort of merged the two things together, and I said, well, if I can help people run their business in a more sustainable and healthy, if you will, way, then I can have both. Because what I know about business is that, and we were talking about this a little bit before we started, what I know about business is that we think that business is all about the number crunching and the systems and processes and all the things. And it is. All of those things are imperatives. And without having the right mindset, especially as the leader, it has an incredible trickle-down effect.
Yeah.
If I'm not walking the talk, it doesn't matter what I say. And I think that's why I finally decided that it's a lot easier to get people to come to me for help with making their business run better than it is for them to admit, well, like, I'm fried and I don't have control over this. We think we should be able to figure it out. Mm-hmm. And oftentimes you can't even see the way out because you're so stuck in that rut.
That's so true. And there's so many examples. Like, you could even take the example of when you live in your house all the time, you don't see that cobweb taking root, right? And because you're in it all the time, right? Yes. And so it's when you go on vacation and you come home and you go, oh my God, how did all these cobwebs happen while I was away? Right? It's the same kind of thing, because all of a sudden it's like you are awake and it's visible and you can see it. And so what I'm hearing you say is, like, you're helping people to sort of clear the cobwebs and start to see beyond just the numbers. Absolutely. Would that be accurate?
Absolutely. And I think so to back up a little bit, when I was in veterinary practice, I was in a very male dominated industry in my little niche. So at the racetrack, very male dominated. And I work with lots of great guys. This is not about men being bad, women being good, just to be clear, but they think differently. And I think I went into it as being a minority, which I was at the time. At the time, there were very few female veterinarians who were working at the level that I wanted to perform at in our area. And so the story, and this is the reason I bring this up, is I think the stories that we tell ourselves are really important because they shape our behaviors, they shape our choices, they shape what we think is possible. And so the story I was telling myself was, if I want to be taken seriously, I need to do this, 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 and this. And I have to outwork the guys. I have to outperform them. I have to be prepared to do even more than they do in order to be taken seriously. And whether or not that was true is really irrelevant, because that's what I told myself for years and years. So, for example, when I had my son, they offered me to have me buy into the practice just as I was coming back from my 3 weeks of maternity vacation. And
your vacation.
It was my vacation time that I used to do my maternity leave. So that was my 3 weeks was, maternity leave. Now by law, I was technically an employee. I could have taken all sorts of time off and I could have all things, but I was convinced that if I did any of that, then I wouldn't be offered to buy into the practice. I wouldn't be up for partnership. And that my customers, the clients, the people I worked with would all think less of me. Now, was any of that true? Who knows? I never asked. I wasn't going to ask, but I think it's this whole idea of we have choices even when we think we don't. And that was it sounds silly, but that was the most valuable lesson that I learned over that whole time period was we have choices. some of them might suck, all of them might suck, but just knowing that you have that agency and that you can make different decisions, I think is the key to avoiding and overcoming burnout if you're already there.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. You've said a number of things there that I'm a huge fan of and promote often myself with choices, because there's a lot of power and empowerment in knowing you have a choice, right?
Yes.
And to your point, they might not always be good, but usually one's better than another
Yeah,
for that specific
absolutely.
moment, right?
Yeah,
And
for
all we
that
have,
moment.
and that's
Yeah.
all we have really, is that specific moment that we are trying to navigate, and you make the best choice possible based on the information, the resources that you have at that moment. What I really heard there was that you had made assumptions about the story that potentially was at play, that had you asked the questions, that might not have even been in play.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And I think part of it was I didn't feel confident about having those conversations. I didn't have anyone who could be a sounding board for me on that at the time. I hadn't surrounded myself with people who I could bounce the ideas off of. It's one of the reasons why now I'm such a huge proponent of people developing their own personal board of directors, in addition to, all the mastermind groups and the various communities you can join. Having some people who are outside of what you do on the daily, who are smarter than you and or have accomplished more than you have, or have accomplished something completely differently than you have, or different than you have, and getting those insights. Because sometimes I have a friend, she's a marketer, but she says, you can't see the label, you can't read the label when you're inside the jar. And so sometimes just having that fresh perspective, even if you don't agree, it gets the thoughts going, it gets your juices flowing, and you think, oh, well, God, I hadn't even thought that was a possibility.
Absolutely. Well, and that ties into your focus around that power of productive pressure, and being able to balance, having this drive for success and drive to accomplish certain things with your overall well-being, right? Because
Yes.
when you have that fresh perspective, instead of maybe feeling that stress and that pressure on you, you start to feel not calm necessarily, but it goes back to the choices, that you can
Yeah.
see things more clearly and that there are possibilities available to you.
Yes. And it's getting to that place of possibilities, because I feel like when you are either on the road to burnout or you're already there, the thing that's gone is that feeling of possibility. You don't feel like anything's possible. At least I certainly didn't. And most of the people that I talk to don't. They feel like there just isn't another viable way at this moment in time. And it's one of the reasons why one of the really useful exercises that one of my mentors gave me a while back was to set aside an hour a week for thinking time. And what he said was, I'm like, how am I going to find an hour? I can't find time to go to the bathroom by myself. How am I going to find an hour a week to sit and, think about stuff? And he said, because we're going to pick a time right now, and then you're going to call me afterwards, and I'm going to make sure you did it. And his point was, sit there and think about possibilities, get in a possibilities mindset, and don't try to solve any problems. Don't try to say why it won't work or what won't work. Just think about the possibilities. It literally changed my life, because I started to realize that there were possibilities. And if I didn't pursue them, that was fine, but that I was making a choice not to pursue them. And even in that subtle little shift, that little shift, there was so much power in that for me.
Well, I'm
Because
sure
I've
power
given it
and
so
clarity.
much, and clarity,
Yeah.
absolutely, and clarity and excitement. Because then I was like, oh, well,
Yeah.
then I could start thinking about, okay, well, if I really did want to do that, how would I go about that? And, who should I talk to? But just having that time for myself, in the beginning, it felt really selfish. It's like, whoa, what is this? Me sitting by myself for an hour? What is this all about? but the power of it was really, really amazing for me.
Yeah, I love that. And I would reframe that selfish to selfless,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
you're right. Yes.
Because you, and so often women in particular, we're very guilty of not taking time for ourselves because we feel guilty, we feel we're being selfish, we're letting somebody else down. But if you use your example of how just by taking that, making that a discipline, making that a priority in your week, it helped you propel into that space of possibility, into that space of, I know I have choices. I can have a blank canvas and create what it is that I want to create. Not easy,
Not
definitely not
easy.
easy.
Not easy, not easy. And in the beginning, it felt awkward, but I'll tell you what, it was a lot better than when I used to hide out in the toilet journaling on my phone because I was so stressed out. So, that was a totally different approach that didn't work very well. But
But you tried it. You tried it.
I tried it. Yeah, because I'd heard that journaling was good. But I didn't really think that I could find the time. And I think that's another thing that's interesting about when you're burned out, it feels like you don't have enough time.
Yeah.
I think the reality is it's often less about how much time we have, and it's more about how we're spending our energy or conserving our energy. I think one of the things that I really learned, and it actually took me a couple of years to actually get good at it, was sleep. Sleep was a big problem for me in that I never prioritized sleep. I was like, it was almost like a badge of courage, right?
Yeah.
I only need 4.5 to 5 hours of sleep a night. I've got this. I can power through. That's what coffee's for. And I know I'm not alone in this. And
I was just going to say, if we took a poll right now,
I'm betting
you probably
there's
have
a lot of people raising their hands. And I think again, as women, I think that, so my perspective was I already missed out on a lot of stuff with my family. So when I came home at night, I wanted to be present for my kids. And so then I would do the whole family thing. And then once everybody was tucked into bed asleep, 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, then I would start doing all the other things that I had to do. Right. All the other things that I had, or at least I felt that I had to do, because I never really learned to delegate very well until much later on. And then I would stay up. And of course, law of diminishing returns. I was tired. I wasn't as focused. It wasn't a good time for me to be doing these types of tasks. And so then I'd finally go to bed. And then, of course, my brain would be worrying about all the things that I hadn't done. And then I'd get up at, 3:30 or 4 o'clock the next morning and go back to work and do it all over again. 6 to 7 days a week for almost 20 years. And how I thought that was sustainable, I really don't know, but I didn't really think about it, frankly. I think I just did it. I didn't think that hard about it. And I think a lot of people get in that place, right? We're used to being high achievers. We know that people expect things of us. And so we just do it.
Well, excuse me. I think what you just described there is, yes, a lot of people get into that place of autopilot, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're doing ultimately, right? It's like we're just doing that. And you said it earlier, we're doing that same thing, thinking we're going to get a different result. And at some point, you got to jump off.
Yes,
right?
you got to jump off. You got to take the leap. Yes, you got to take the leap. And actually, that's interesting because there were a few books along the way that I read that really made me realize, because I had sort of, because I was one of the few women in my area, I think I had sort of siloed myself a little bit. And when I started reading, so I read Marshall Goldsmith and Sally Harrison wrote that book called How Women Rise. And I read that and I went, oh my gosh, I do that. They have I think it's 12 habits of women that men don't do. We don't talk about what we've accomplished. We don't talk about, anyway, there are a bunch of, but I just sort of went, wow, there are enough people that are struggling with this, that someone wrote a book. They wrote a book about it.
I'm not alone.
I'm not alone. And so then I started doing some more reading. And to your point about, taking a leap, I read The Big Leap by Gay Hendrickson. I'm going to get it wrong. But that was another life-changing book for me, because he talked about your upper limit problem and how, you know, you need to be working in your zone of genius. And like, these were all things that now I'm so comfortable with the concepts that I don't even think about them. But at the time, I didn't know that was the thing. I just thought you were supposed to do whatever if you were good at it and you could get it done, you should get it done.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that I was spending a lot of time doing things that I was good at, but that completely drained my energy.
Yeah.
And so that's my point, is that I think that a lot of times it's not about how you're spending your time, it's how you're spending your energy and
Great
getting
distinction.
Yeah. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
the same amount of time, and some people get more stuff done in a given amount of time because they're mindful of what they have energy for at what times of the day, or what they don't have energy for at all, and they find someone else to do that for them.
Yeah. And you know, somebody in our audience might be thinking, well, I don't have anyone else to delegate that to.
Yep.
Well, you actually do, right? Because there's lots of ways that you can outsource, even with your kids or your
Yes.
partners or whatever. Like, there's ways. You just have to get creative and also communicate it. It's
Yeah.
okay for us to say, I can't do it all. I need support.
So that was the biggest struggle for me.
Yeah.
That was the biggest struggle for me. And when I got divorced the second time and had 2 little kids, that was when I really understood. I mean, I guess as you get older, you start to understand some of these sayings, right? It takes a village.
Yes.
That was when I learned to ask for help. I had never asked for help before then, because I just thought that I had to do it all. I was supposed to be super mom, super, you know, vet, super everything. And what I learned through that is that people like to help. They want to help. You just need to ask. I wasn't asking. As soon as I asked, I had people falling all over themselves wanting to help me. And I did learn to outsource. I did learn to hire good people to help me at home as well. Mm-hmm. So that for the things that I didn't need to be the one doing, so that I could be present for the things that really mattered.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And, you know, I'm going to go back to your comment earlier about that mind shift, right? The mindset shift, because that in itself is such an important shift for women in particular, because, you know, you can put the excuses in of, oh, I don't want to be a bother. I don't want to ask for help. I can't afford it. And those things can be true at times, but there is always a way you can barter. There's all kinds of different ways that you can compensate for that exchange. But bigger than that, it's a gift, right? And I love what you just shared, Dawn. Yeah. When you said, once you opened up and you started asking for help, people were falling all over themselves to help you, because that's a gift.
Right. And it's funny, because I know that I like to help people. Why it didn't occur to me that other people would like to help me, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. But because it seems so obvious. But people love to help. It makes them feel good too. And so I think that was a really valuable lesson for me, is that, you know, as much as I like to help other people, why wouldn't people like to help me?
Exactly.
So you're right. There's so many different ways you can do it. You can barter, you can and if you really get down to thinking about the things you waste a lot of time on, like there's some stuff around the house that you waste a lot of time on that you could be making money faster, better, more efficiently at work if you weren't trying to deal with that stuff at the same time, right?
Exactly. And, you know, it's so important that we step into our power by doing those things, because it gives us more space so that you have that hour to sit and think, right? Like it brings it all together. And, you know, I struggled with the same thing. Like when you were just saying that, like, I wouldn't ask for help. I thought I had to do it all myself. And there's such a shift energetically that happens when you're able to include others in your journey. We are human beings, not meant to be on our own. And the other thing you talked about was, like, you know, just finding that advisory board, finding that support network. And that can come in lots of different ways. It can be in your community, within your family, within your work colleagues. That comes in lots of different ways. And you deserve that as a person.
Yes. And it can be so rewarding. And here's the other thing. Again, those people like helping. Like, I love mentoring other people. Like, I love helping other people in any way that I can, sometimes my own detriment, but other people like helping me as well, because it makes them feel good that they know something that's useful to somebody else. And just being able to pass that knowledge along, I really think, I'm sure there's some, evolutionary piece in all of that, but it is really rewarding on both sides.
Sure, it is. It is. Well, and I think, the pandemic really taught us the importance of connection, right?
Yeah.
And
Yes.
connection happens in so many different ways. And I mean, you and I were talking about this before we started, but burnout is probably one of the biggest epidemics we have right now. And
Yes.
we've gone through the great resignation, the great transformation, whatever you want to call it. But at the essence of it, it is about burnout. And burnout usually happens when you feel you don't have a choice and you're all alone.
Yes.
And so, I think our message today is really about surround yourself with a great community of people that are going to lift you up and support you, that you can support as well. But start to recognize those signals when that burnout is creeping in.
Yes, exactly. And don't be afraid to ask for help, because I feel like, especially for those of us who have lived our whole lives as overachievers, high performers, we get it done. And as women, it is just harder for us. It's harder for us to ask for help. It's harder for us to not feel, I think for a lot of us, it's harder to not feel weak if we ask for support.
Yeah.
We need support. We all need support. Everybody needs support. And just asking for it and being willing to be a little bit vulnerable in that can make all the difference. And knowing that you have choices, like, to me, that was the big thing for me, was just wrapping myself. And there were times in my life where the choices sucked. I mean, they really sucked. I looked at, because I'm like a big pros, I'll like make a list, pros and cons, and what are the choices? What are the options? What are the good and the bad? Sometimes, like, there were 3 choices and they all seemed terrible, but one was less terrible than the other 2. And so you pick that one. But getting to choose is a game changer. Playing the victim is exhausting, because there's no out. There's no out when you play the victim.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Never.
And something you said just a second ago, I just want to call that back, because you said, oftentimes we think that it's a weakness when we ask. It's actually a strength, right? Because you're creating that ripple effect when you ask for support, when you ask for help. You're telling others that it's okay to do that. And that takes bravery. It takes courage to ask for that help.
Yes. And I have to tell you, that's the one thing about, burnout coming to the forefront during the pandemic that to me has been if you will, like a blessing of a sort, because people are now talking about it.
Sure.
People are talking about it. You don't have to hide behind it anymore. People are talking about it. And if we talk about it and we shine some light on it, then we can help lift each other up. If we're all hiding out in it and just, sucking it up, it's hard. It's hard to navigate through that on your own.
It is.
So I'm excited that we're having the conversations. It's really fascinating to me now, all of the industries that I didn't like. I knew in veterinary medicine that burnout was a big deal. Compassion fatigue, there's life and death and all that stuff. It makes sense in the healthcare industries. What's interesting to me now is it's coming out in the construction industry. It's becoming obvious in the legal field. Like, every field you look at, people are experiencing these. It's a common human condition. So we need to be able to talk about it and work through it together.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So Dawn, what have we not talked about that we need to make sure our audience knows today before we wrap up?
I would say that, first of all, we've talked about it a lot, is find your support system and ask for help. Learning to delegate and do it well, where you tell someone what you want the intended outcome to be, and maybe spend a little less time telling them exactly how to do it, is also a gift. Delegating is a gift for you and the person you delegate to, if you delegate to the right person in the right way. And I think that's another little shift, that if you can master that, it can really change your life. And again, it doesn't have to always be paid help. It could be asking your spouse, your family, whatever. But just remember that delegation can be a gift if it's done well. So explain the desired outcome, set them up for success with the right resources. I sound like a broken record, but it's a big one. And then I would say that that there are so many, all sorts of tips and tricks about shortcuts to getting yourself, like to buying yourself enough space to sort of be able to breathe and regroup. So look for resources on, time blocking and different ways of managing your time. But keep in mind that really the key is managing your energy. Sleep. Like, I'm a big biohacker now. So it's like sleep, it matters. Getting exercise, getting sunlight, get out. If you're in the house, go outside and get a walk, get some sunshine in the morning. Little stuff like that can really change your mood. And the other thing that I love is thinking about how we curate our inputs. I think there's been some study done on like the positivity ratio, and you need I think it's 3 positive inputs to overcome each negative one. And so think about what you're feeding your brain with every day, and be mindful. Like, what are you listening to? What are you watching on TV? I'm not saying you can't watch or listen to any junk, but just keep in mind that what you're introducing to your brain is what is what's sitting and percolating around there. That's why, you watch a crazy movie and have weird dreams. Like, yeah. So think about what you're putting in.
Love that. Love that. Oh boy, that's a whole podcast episode.
It is. Yeah, I know. We could do a whole one on that.
It's true. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Cause you're feeding yourself with how you're going to see things, how you interact with things. And so make that shift and add those positives. Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think that's why the stories we tell ourselves are so powerful, right? The stories we tell ourselves are so powerful because that's, our brain's like, oh, okay, sure. All right, well, we'll make that real.
Yeah, we do. That's exactly what we do. Or we think that becomes our reality. And again, back to your comment on it's a choice, right? And you can decide, because your brain doesn't know the difference between the positive and the negative. It will just, whatever you're feeding, it's going to keep, reeling that over and over. Yeah. So it's your choice to shift it to the positive.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, Dawn, thank you so much for joining us. How can our audience find you? Where would they, whether it be social, your website, how would they find you?
Yeah. My website's easy, productivepressure.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn. So come find me on LinkedIn. I love to connect with people. So please shoot me a message, connect with me on LinkedIn. And otherwise, check out my website. Lots of free resources there. And I'm always excited to meet new people. So
awesome. Awesome. So if you have questions, because you've heard us talking about a lot of things about burnout and, owning your agency and shifting from that, negative to positive. If you have other questions, reach out to Dawn, connect on LinkedIn. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll send the questions to Dawn. We're happy to work that way. Just want to make sure that, you have your questions answered. And sometimes it can be overwhelming and we feel like, how do we even start? And just by you listening to this podcast is a way that you've started. So you won't unlearn what you've just heard here today. It'll stick with you. Oh, how am I thinking? Or what am I feeding my soul with? So keep those things in mind as you, spend your day walking, hopefully in the sunshine, or, whatever you might be doing. But, I want to thank our audience. I appreciate you being here and always listening into the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. And if you have a friend who needs to hear this episode, please do share it. Introduce them to the podcast so that, they get some of the same inspiration and influence that you're getting. So Dawn, thank you again for being with us. And, we may have to do this again.
So much fun. Thank you so much, Vicki. I've had a great time.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure.
Appreciate your audience very much.
Yes, absolutely. And just as one last note, one thing that Dawn mentioned is, building that support system around you. And one of the courses that WIL Empowered offers is we offer an on-demand networking course. And it's more than networking. It's about how to connect with people. And oftentimes we're hesitant to reach out. So if you're, struggling with building your connections, go on our website at WIL Empowered, check out our on-demand Love It or Hate It networking course. And that'll help you, really get into practicing, but also building connections, because we do monthly live Q&A sessions and practice sessions. So check that out again at WIL Empowered. That's 1L. So thank you everyone for joining us and have a great day. We look forward to seeing you on the next Women in Leadership Talk podcast.